When they asked if I would share my testimony with you, and just in about 15 or 20 minutes, I thought, Lord, how do you put 50 years into 15 minutes? But this morning, as I was praying, what the Lord wanted me to share about my testimony, it was a little cute illustration that he gave me. I came and answered the call to belong to him when I was 5. But then for 40 years, I lived what I called the wilderness. I would have been a great Israelite. My life could be more described as an up and down roller coaster, in and out, altar experience to altar experience. It wasn't until 1999 that God really met me and I found himself. And in the last 7 years, I've lived in the Canaan land. I was raised in a Christian home and probably was blessed more than I can even begin to tell you of all the goodness that God gave me. Christian parents, Christian homes, Christian schools, Christian colleges, the best of music teachers. The Lord really bestowed upon me a heritage, a godly heritage. He filled me with his goodness. And when I was 5 and I asked him into my heart, I believe that I answered his call to belong. Somehow I understood, even at the age of 5, that I needed Christ to come into my heart. But the motive for that was I didn't want to go to hell. There wasn't a whole lot of deep sins that a 5-year-old can do, but I knew that I needed him, and I asked him into my heart at 5. And I knew that I belonged to him. And from that time, I earnestly wanted to serve God. I wanted to do good and be good. And I can remember as a child and in the churches, people would say, what are you going to do for Jesus? And I figured then that the holier I became holy and could do great things for God, then I would reach a standard of religiosity and of really being God's by what I did. So I set my goals high. I figured the most important thing that I could ever do, if I really wanted to be a great Christian, would be a missionary or a missionary's wife or a pastor's wife. And I think part of that was because of the models that I had in my church. They were so filled with Jesus and they served him, and so I decided that's what I was going to do. So that was my goal, and in a Christian college, I remember my principal when I graduated from high school said, what are you going to do with your life? And I said, I'm going to marry a missionary or a preacher and be in full-time Christian service. And he said, well, what if you marry a layman? I said, well, then I just won't get married. And he just chuckled. And I went on to college and got my degree, and I began dating Phil. And Phil said, I can't promise you I'm going into the ministry, but that's the direction I'm going. And I thought, well, that's good enough for me. So we got married. Phil went to seminary. We were youth pastors for a while, and then we even had a pastorate, and he finished seminary. We had 3 little boys. And in that time period, Phil began to have his own business. And towards the end, we lived in Wilmore we did live in Wilmore 10 years. Towards the end of those years, he had begun a business to pay his way through seminary and provide for his family. He said, Linda, I really do not believe that I'm going to go into the pastorate. I think God wants me to remain in business. And I thought, uh-oh, you've missed his will. And I had everybody in Wilmore agreeing with me. But we moved to Ohio, and there was a real finality in that. Now you have to understand what my dreams were. They were big. So I was going to be the hostess with the mostest as a pastor's wife. We were going to just have great ministry. We were going to have a wonderful marriage. I was going to have girls, and we were just going to have a tremendous life. And when we moved to Mount Vernon, Ohio, I had 3 boys. We lived on a farm. We had 20 horses, 4 dogs, mules, cats, and no beauty. And I remember one clear day, the boys were 2, 4, and 6, and we had just moved there, and we were out in the barn Phil said, I need you out of the barn because I'm going to do some breeding and I need your help. I said, you're going to do some what? So we went out to the barn. There was a new stallion there, and he didn't know what he was doing. And there was a new mare, and she didn't know what she was doing. And there was Phil, who had never done this before. And I surely didn't know what I was doing. And as that stallion came and met that mare, and I was to twitch the horse's nose and hold her steady so that she could be what she was supposed to be, I clearly remember that day as if it was yesterday. And I stood there and the tears began to roll down my cheeks, and I said, Lord, I don't think you know what you're doing. Somebody has made a big mistake. We homeschooled our boys, which was not easy. We had an ADHD child. And my life began to sort of cave in on me. My dreams that I had in doing great things for God no longer looked like they were going to ever work out. Life was filled with disappointments, pains, dysfunctions. And I can clearly remember thinking, Lord, I think I've missed my calling. It wasn't that I didn't want to be God's. I was a good person. And I had had altar experience after altar experience. I had surrendered many rooms, many areas. But the problem was just like the Israelites. I wanted to be his people, but I didn't understand why God really wanted me. I love the Israelite story because it so is just exactly where I lived. I think most of us come to him because we don't understand who God is or for what he wants to do for us once we belong. We want to be chosen. I wanted to be chosen, but I wanted a God who would perform for me. To put it really clearly, I wanted Jesus, but I also had many pluses in my life. I wanted Jesus plus ministry. I wanted Jesus plus success. I wanted Jesus plus a really good marriage. I wanted a Jesus plus recognition. I could give you a whole list of pluses. Jesus plus this, Jesus plus that, Jesus plus this. In 1998, the Lord began to really deal with me, and I became increasingly more restless and dissatisfied with my life. I was not filled with the responses of Christ, and I knew that. I was more like a screecher creature, as Beth talked about. And I remember, our children are very smart, and they know us probably better than we know ourselves. We are great professors, but few of us, at least I, did not possess what I professed. And Jesus told the Israelites in Ezekiel, he said, everywhere you've gone, you've profaned my name because you're showing the world that I'm not capable of doing what I've made you to be. And that's exactly what I was doing. And I remember one day, it's interesting because almost every one of the speakers has talked about the feminine part of us and how we tend to use that as an excuse. Well, it's PMS or generational bondages, or that's just the way I am, or it's my personality. And I remember one day, I think Matthew was about 5 years old, and he was sitting in the bathtub, and he looked up at me and he said, Mommy, are you in your period? And I retorted back, yes, I am. But in the spring of 1999, I really came to a crisis point in my life. And I remember sitting in the bathroom. Don't you just love it? There he goes again, talking to us in the bathroom, but it's the only place where we're quiet and alone. I crawled up in the little shelf we have and I said, Jesus, if you can't do more for me than this, you are God Almighty. I'm supposed to belong to you. I was leading Bible studies, holding retreats, played the piano, did everything for him. But inside the deepest part of my soul, I knew I was not living or acting like Jesus, and I didn't have the peace that I knew he could give, or I was told that he could give. I was very dissatisfied. And I said, Lord, if you don't do something for me, I'm done. I'm done with Phil. I'm certainly done with this farm. And I'm done with living for you because I cannot accomplish. I've missed it. I've missed my calling. You said you would be enough for me, and you're not enough for me. Now, I don't have very long here, but in the March 4th, 1999, in the middle of the night, Jesus called me out. I couldn't sleep. And I said to him, Lord, you said you would be enough, but you're not enough. And the Lord said, no, I'm not enough, because you have all these pluses. You want me to fix you. You want me to just zap you into goodness. You know, if he corrected all these areas in our lives and made us perfect, as we were talking about, as we want to be, we would never go to him. The reason that he even made me to belong to him and fills me with himself is so that I can come to him and have a relationship with him. But he said, Linda, that has to be enough for you. If you don't have any ministry, if you don't have a perfect marriage, if you don't have children even that serve me, am I enough for you? Will you love me for just who I am? Will you just come to me so that I can fill you and you will be my dwelling place? So that not only do you belong, but that I can fill you with my presence and you'll have my nature. It's an exchange. It's an exchange of my position so that now I am his. It's an exchange of possession, myself for himself. And it's an exchange of purpose, not my wills, but your will. And I remember in the middle of the night, I knew I had died. I saw myself for the first time and how deep self went. Now you can say, how can a Christian live like that? Because we don't understand that many times we go around living as pious, selfish, sanctified people. We want to be holy. We want to have the title. And we're good at covering up what we really are. But I think Jesus took the privilege in my life of letting life cave in so that I could find himself. And out of that time, he has given me incredible freedom of just loving him. When he becomes enough, it's one thing to say, I'll follow you and I want to serve you and do great things for you. But it's another thing to say, I'm going to come to you and you do with me whatever you desire, even if it never counts, even if I never get any credit. All I want is you, and I want your nature and your relationship and your presence in my life. And Jesus met me. And I remember a couple of days later, I heard my son say, do you think Jesus is really enough for Mother? I used to count on his sufficiency without desiring himself. But when Jesus became enough, I can rest in him, trusting in his all-sufficiency to meet whatever I face, and there is a difference. What if he doesn't heal that child? Or suppose he doesn't give you a perfect marriage?